Welcome to the Handyman Pros Radio Show. Home improvement and maintenance tips from the pros.
Welcome to the Handyman Pros Radio Show Action Edition, where we feature feedback from you, our listeners. I'm here with my old buddy, Larry. Larry, what's been going on?
John, not a whole lot. It's been raining a little bit. Raining and snowing, actually. A little bit of snow.
It is.
Yeah, tons of fun. Lots of water. I don't know about at your house.
Oh, yeah. Oh, a lot.
A lot. And
believe me, I've been watching the places around my house that actually gets accumulation just to make sure.
Oh, I believe it. And actually, it's kind of funny. That really leads us to our question of the week. We got a question from the email bag at questions@handymanprosradioshow.com. We got a note from Jim. Jim had a flood in his basement. Big surprise there. His sump pump did not come on. And his question was, is there a way to test your sump pump before it's too late? In his case, too late, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I grew up with a sump pump, Larry. So these things, it's a motor, it's a pump, and they will break. And so you'll pop fuses. They'll just a common occurrence. And
so describe a sump pump just quickly for people who don't have one.
So sump pump, for those who don't know, it's in a basement. They'll generally slope the floor and into some drains, and in those drains the tile goes to a pit, if you will, a round pit, and in the bottom of that pit is a pump, and that is your sump pump, and it's piped out into your system outside somewhere. Depending upon what the codes are. So it takes all the water that gets accumulated in your basement, because one thing we know about basements is they will get wet. So yeah, that's really what the job of a sump pump is.
So the sump pump, the ones that I had in my house growing up, which I haven't had one in a while, but we did have one growing up. The motor itself was up on a pole, kind of like a tall pole. I would say it was probably 36 inches up off the ground, and it had a switch on it that was a float. It was kind of like a toilet float. As the water rose up, it raised the switch and turned the pump on. So we want to talk about that. So how do you test that sump pump, John?
You know what? Get some buckets of water and pour it down into that pit and make sure that thing comes on. And I will tell you, over the years, is that you will start to accumulate a lot of garbage in that pit, just as it rolls in, and it'll start to clog up that pump, and it'll make the pump work harder. The pump will finally give out. And I remember my dad, we always had an extra sump pump, with sitting somewhere. Because, on a moment's notice, you might have to change that thing out. So if it doesn't work. Now, what my recommendation is I'm going to go back here for a second, say just pour in, some buckets of water into that pit and make sure that the sump pump goes on. That, like you mentioned, that the float is working, the, that triggering mechanism that turns it on is working, that whole thing, because, when the storms hit, you're gonna feel a whole lot better that thing has the ability to get rid of water.
And I will add, make sure that it pumps the water out of the basement, because one time we had the hose come off and all it did was pump the water back into the basement. So Make sure that it's pumping the water out of the basement. Make sure that the pump itself actually works, right, John? Because you just said it, and I'm glad you did. You get sediment. It's not really garbage, but it's sediment. It's dirt, because the water washes down. It's a basement. The water washes down in there. Well, that sediment will get up in that pump and actually make that pump not work. And depending on how wet your basement is, all that kind of stuff. But you can actually have where the motor comes on, but the pump does not pump, or the hose gets clogged because that happens also. You get a critter in there or something, and it gets clogged up. So make sure it's pushing the water out. Do that on basically a nice sunny day, or really, I guess it depends on what part of the country you live in. But most people have this issue. Generally, in the South, it's in the wintertime because like we're in torrential rains here in Atlanta right now, and then up in the North, it's at melt, right, John? I mean, when I lived up north, when the snow melts,
and there's a lot of rain there. It's just one of those things. I don't have a sump pump in my house here, but I know people that do around here. But it's something it's one of those maintenance things that you really need to pay attention to.
Yep.
Amongst everything in your house.
Yeah, you've only got 4,000 systems to check. It's just another thing to put on the list. How often do you think somebody should check it, John?
I would try to check that thing, as often as you can. When you're thinking about it, probably once every 6 months.
Yeah, I would say put it on your calendar about every 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, be kind of the detective on it, just listen to make sure that, it's the motor's running fine and those kind of things. Because after a while, you'll start to notice, at least I did, when that motor and you start to get clogged up a little bit.
Yep. And so one other thing too, just thinking about this, John, what if you pour water in there, the lift lifts up and it doesn't go, you hear nothing, it doesn't go on. Where do you go?
Well, that's the easiest answer right there is to make sure that you've got electricity to the motor itself.
Right, which I always do by wetting my 2 fingers and touching the hot leads. No.
Yeah.
No, don't do that, folks.
Yeah, don't do that. Over at the make sure that the breaker's on and that kind of thing.
Yeah, make sure the breaker's on it.
Not popped.
And I think a lot of them too, I think probably current ones, if I had to think, probably have an onboard breaker as well. So there'll be like a little red button kind of like on your garbage disposal that you might have to pop too. Yeah. So yeah, check your electric is basically where I was checking. Make sure you got power to it. If you've got power to it and you don't get any power coming on, you've either got a bad switch, which is easy enough to check, or you might have burned the motor up and then it's time for the replace. Or probably time for the replace. But anyway, all right. Any other tips on sump pumps?
No, that's really it. It's something to really pay attention to because nobody likes a flooded basement.
No, it gets very, very expensive. All right, well, we want to end this edition of the Handyman Pros Radio Show. Don't forget, if you have a question, please send us the question it's at questions@handymanprosradioshow.com or go to the contact page on our website at handymanprosradioshow.com. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've enjoyed this podcast and have derived some value from it, here's 4 things you can do. 1, tell your friends about this podcast. 2, hit subscribe on your podcast player. While you're there, leave us a review. 3, subscribe to our newsletter by going to handymanprosradioshow.com and click on the subscribe button. We'll inform you of upcoming events, shows, and give you actionable tips for maintaining your home and property. And 4, send us an email with your questions to questions@handymanprosradioshow.com. That's handymanprosradioshow.com. That's our show for this week. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week on the Handyman Pros Radio Show.